Welcome back, everybody. Hope you're having a great holidays and everyone's keeping safe. Today, I'm gonna try and finish the chassis for the 46. I've been doing a little bit of work on it between last night and today, and I'm basically gonna show you what I've done so far and where we're gonna go from here. So I removed the cab from the chassis and I went ahead and welded in all of my plates at each joint just to give it some extra strength. These are just 2x2 plates that I cut, and this one's actually like a diamond shape to fill in that area better. But yeah, I unclamped it from the table, and I was actually able to flip it on its side to weld this, flip it the other way, weld the other side, and while I was at it, I finished welding the bottom side of all these tubes. Right now we're going to move on to the 4-link, and I bought a Bears Performance 4-link kit, and I went ahead and bolted one side together. Like, these are some beefy heim joints I grabbed. Should have no problem with those. And having never assembled a 4-link before, I'm going to do it the way I think it should happen, and I think it'll be pretty easy. But these things, like these are some, like this is precise. All these bolt holes, if I take an 1.25" tube, try to do it with one hand. But that slides in and out pretty easy. Like, that's tight. Like, everything I got from them was awesome. Like, even these guys slide in beautifully. So yeah, we're gonna try and get this stuff welded in first. I have another longer piece of 1.25" because that's what these are. These are 1.25". That hole is 1.25". So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna run this bar straight through all 4 of these plates just to keep everything in line. And like I'm gonna bolt my other heim joints into this plate. And I tighten the bolts down. I didn't reef them tight, but they're snug. And then yeah, everything should be spaced properly apart. So let's get to that. So right now, both sides are perfectly vertical, and it's all tight up against the frame. And that's centered. I centered it to the 3-inch tubing. 27 3/16. 27 3/16. I'd say it's about as perfect as you can get. All right, in the perfect world, I should be able to pull my ratchet strap off and slide that piece of tubing out. Oh, not a perfect world. Oh, there she goes, she turns. And she moves. So it's all tacked in. I don't like to weld stuff completely solid until I know it's all going to work out. So I want to get the rear axle sitting in place with its corresponding brackets, get the bars tacked together, and see how it all looks. Here is my 9-inch housing that I'm using. It's from an early 70s Ranchero. Now, since I can't slide my brackets over the end because it's already got the flanges on, I will have to notch out the front side of the plate. So I've got the brackets bolted together like I did with the rears, and I spaced them out to where I think they should be. I'm gonna, once I get the axle sitting in it, then I'll fine tune it. I had another piece of the I think it's 1 3/4, the same tubing I used for the frame here, and I slid it through that hole, the lower hole. This upper hole here, the housing actually sits in its way, so I couldn't slide anything through there. But it should be fine. I've got this one in there to kind of help square everything up, and then I use the ratchet strap just to hold it down to the table, because once I drop the axle in here, it's going to want to just fall forward. So I've got my marks already here. That measuring out towards the end of it, those marks are the inside of these brackets. So if I drop this in there and the inside of these brackets line up with the white lines, I'm good. Now I don't know if this is intentional, but like when I roll this axle down, the bottom of the housing, bottom corner hits the bar, but it gives me a slight angle. Like when you line up these two bolts, the bottom of that housing isn't perfectly flat. So when these things are vertical, the housing will be slightly tilted up a bit, which is what I'm looking for, I think. And yeah, I don't know if it's intended to be like that, but that's what I'm gonna do. And I'm actually gonna just weld that in there as well. That much more bracing. Guys, we have a bit of a problem. There used to be a welder on this cart. So that welding that you saw me doing on the rear end, everything was going good until it wasn't. And the welder decided to just stop working. Luckily, it's so new, it has a warranty. And I called the company that sells them. And basically I had to take it down and drop it off with them, and they're hoping to have it back to me by tomorrow. That's best case scenario. So everything kind of came to a halt. Now I have the option of using a MIG welder to finish stuff off, but I'm not in that much of a hurry to get it done. Like I've got enough welded that I can keep going with other stuff. And I'm going to show you what I've kind of put together here, because I'm a visual person. I need to see how things are going to look to decide what I'm going to do going forward, and I'll show you what I mean by that. I had enough on the rear end welded. It's not totally done. I'll finish it later. but I had enough done to get it kind of put together, and I have it hanging in its place. The rear, like the rear arms, I've just got slid together, they're not welded, but I want to see the profile, how this is all going to sit, because there's a reason why I only tacked in the front of the forelink. And now that I've got them tacked in, I'm glad I only tacked them in, because I might have to move them. This whole housing sits awfully high up into the bracket, higher than what I thought. I know that I'm running a 28-inch tall tire in the back, and there'll be a 26-inch tire in the front. When I measure the height of this compared to the bottom of the frame, basically the frame is going to be sitting 6 inches off the ground. That's a little lower than I want to go. But I want to try and keep this bar horizontal. I do have the option, I can kind of, you know, knock this up a hole or two, and that'll drop the rear end down, essentially raising the back end of the truck up. The other option I have is taking these brackets, and if I moved it down 2 inches, put a spacer in up here, and I can kind of gusset it down here in front of the bottom of the forelink bracket. I can basically lower the whole rear end, arms, everything all down a couple inches, giving me about 8 inches of clearance underneath. So that's just one of the things I've been thinking of. The other reason why I want to kind of raise it up is because when I look at where my front axle has to sit, height-wise, look how high this is compared to the frame. Like, my steering linkage has to bolt in on the bottom side of this, which basically frames in the way. So I think up front here, oh, sorry, I got the engine sitting in place. Cab, engine, everything's sitting in place, just to kind of get an idea where everything's gonna sit. But I feel like I'm gonna have to move this front section of frame higher. So I'm thinking of lopping it off right here and bringing it up. And basically, if I brought up 4 inches, so basically if I had a frame rail sitting right on top of this guy, so if I cut it, slide it up 4 inches and brought it across, that should give me the clearance for my steering. And then this bracket, the suicide bracket that's gonna come up and mount, like the mount for my spring, it's the perch, it won't have to sweep up so high. It can come out more level. And we also have the issue back here with the drive shaft. The pinion for the rear diff is right about here. I have a feeling I'm going to be into the floor of the cab. Even the tranny up here, like, it's going to get hairy. I don't know if I'm going to have to notch a tunnel into my floor. Unfortunately, I had to drop the, I had an empty 4L80 case here that I was going to use for mock-up, and sure enough, the part that we've been waiting for a manual valve body, finally showed up, and he wanted to get the tranny in there to get it put together for me. So I'm without a tranny for the next week, so I can't mock that up totally. And then the other thing, looking at how far the oil pan hangs down below the frame. I mean, if the frame's only 6 inches off the ground, that's hanging about 3 inches lower than the frame. That is not comfortable for me as far as clearance goes. I do plan on driving this thing on the street, pulling in and out of parking lots, any kind of speed bump, oil pan's toast. I know I can get an aftermarket oil pan that'll save me about an inch and a half of clearance, which I'm probably going to go with. But I don't want to raise the engine up any higher because we're just going to get too far up into the firewall and floor area. So I'm pretty sure I've got a game plan now. I'm going to move from the firewall forward. That section of frame is going to be raised up 4 inches. Just want to show you guys what I did before I weld this in solid. All I did was lop it off just in front of the cab, about 3 inches in front of the cab. Moved the whole thing up 4 inches. I just put pieces of scrap 4-inch tubing in its place and cut myself some 90-degree gussets to fill the voids. I've got it all tacked in. I'm just gonna burn this all in with the MIG. I did get my TIG welder back, but this is gonna require so much welding that it's gonna be so much faster just to use the MIG. And I'm just gonna be grinding it all down smooth anyway because I don't want these welds to be shown. I just want it to look nice and smooth. So the MIG will be the way to go for that one. And then we can get back to putting the cab on and everything else. And there's how my notch turned out. All welded in, took a flap disc to it, ground it down. But that's the 4-inch step that is in the frame. And I've sat the axle. This is roughly where I think it's going to be. So I'm gonna end up knocking this out and moving it back here, shortening up the frame. But now the steering, like the tie rod ends, here's the bar just kind of quickly spun together. We'll ride underneath. And since it comes in from the bottom side, there's where it'll sit. So it's about 3 inches between the frame and that. And once you get some load on it, it's got to have some room to go up and down without hitting the frame. But I like how that turned out. I do have some space between the cab and the frame. But I think that looks good. So I got my TIG welder back. So I finished welding out the 4-link brackets on the rear end, and I even welded in the 1 3/4 bar going across, welded that right to the housing. And I tacked in all of my 4-link bars, and I've got them all set to just a rough length. And it's squared up and centered in the back of the truck here. And then the diagonal bar is a cut to length. I cut that and have that tacked in as well. So yeah, and then I don't have any more 1 3/4 tubing. So I just used a piece of 2x2 that I had in here. And this is gonna be my shock mount. And I've got some pretty sweet billet offset shock mounts that I picked up, and I've got the bar set directly over top of that. So the shock will mount right to the underside, and I think that's also going to be the point that my my roll cage ties into, the bars that are going to go up into the back of the cab. But that's it for the back for now. I have to wait until I get my transmission back. Being a visual person, I need to I'm making it up as I go. I don't want to put my cab mounts in or anything yet. I don't want to get the engine, I don't want to get the front axle set yet until I know how much clearance I have. Because, like I said, with how high the diff is compared to the cab, we have an issue there. I feel like I'm either raising the cab up, which I might, either that or I'm moving the bracket down, but I might do both. I might move the whole rear end down, like taking these brackets, setting them down a couple inches, raising the cab up 1 inch. I don't know yet. So until I get the tranny back, we can't really mock that up, but the frame itself is looking great, and I'm happy with it. We're getting it knocked out pretty quick, which is good. So I'm gonna end it off there. As soon as I get the tranny back, we're gonna try and get the engine, tranny, cab, everything all mounted, front axle mounted. But you know, hopefully by the end of the week I'll have that and we can get that knocked out. But that's it. See ya.